So, as I'm sure most people have heard by now, it's been in the news a lot. There's a migrant caravan coming through Mexico at the moment, and the Trump administration's weighed in on it. We'll get to that, but first, I want you to watch this video put together by Media Matters for America, showing Fox News hosts' reaction to this migrant caravan.
Good evening, everybody. Our top stories: the caravan of illegal immigrants from Honduras headed for the United States.
To have 3,000 people in a caravan cross the American border, break American law, recognizing that if that happens, the next caravan will be even bigger.
An organized effort to crush or rush the border right before the midterm elections.
They've got all sorts of help. This is contrived. This is a complete political stunt by the left.
Will the mass migration from other poor countries in Central America be stopped at all, ever?
Everybody who thinks we don't have enough crime in America, we don't have enough drugs in America, we don't have enough violence in America, vote Democrat.
Think of the amount of fentanyl or the human trafficking that comes across modern-day slavery.
Congressman, they do not care.
The deadliest illegal drugs crossing that border: human smuggling, sex trafficking, guns.
Criminal illegal aliens coming in. So it's basically end the rule of law.
Many of them coming across the border, I agree with President Trump, are criminals.
Criminals mixed in with these families.
Human trafficking, the drug trafficking, more than half of all of the major destructive drugs that come across that border.
Democrats want to abolish ICE.
Do you want your government to eliminate ICE and have open borders?
Radical Dems prefer open borders, more crime, more drugs, and more illegal immigrants.
Versus a Republican Party trying to protect you from criminals.
Make sure these criminals, these violent, brutal individuals are not coming in.
Of this, my friends, you can be sure. Your views on immigration will have zero impact and zero influence on a House dominated by Democrats who want to replace you, the American voters, with newly amnestied citizens and an ever-increasing number of chain migrants.
They're going to tell you it's about civil rights or some other principle they pretend to care about, but they're lying. It's about seizing power and holding it. That's their only aim. They're deadly serious about it. While you were grilling in the backyard last night, they were plotting, in effect, a coup.
The question is, do you think we would have a country left if we elect Dems who are planning wide open borders? That'd be even wider open than apparently they are, according to DHS. The free flow of drugs, mob rule on our streets, re-regulation of business, and then higher taxes. How does that sound?
So, that's not even funny, man. That's just straight up disturbing. Fox News is obviously always against immigration, migrants, refugees of any kind, whether it's the people from Syria who are fleeing the country that were supporting, the opposite side, the terrorist side, fighting the government. Over 3 million people have been displaced. That's why the refugee crisis in Europe blew up and was such a big deal, because all these people from Syria had nowhere to go because they were getting killed in their own country. I believe it was more than 3 million, because 3 million was how many people left Yemen. That's my fault. You know how many people from Yemen we've taken in? That's a country where we're explicitly helping the Saudi Arabians, the same ones who killed the journalist, cut his head off after they cut his fingers off, took a bone saw to him and dismembered him, then apparently dumped him in the woods or something. I'll get to that story later. That's a whole nother thing to talk about. But the same government that we're doing, that just did that, is also bombing kids in Yemen. That has led to an outbreak of famine. The World Health Center or other UN organizations have said, I think 2 or 3 million children are now at risk of starvation. Cholera's outbreak there is devastating the population, and even though cholera is a somewhat serious disease if untreated, it's very easy to treat if you just have simple medical things like an IV. But we're also supporting a Saudi blockade of Yemen, so they can't get any medicine, any food, any supplies to their ports, where all these, and in their most populated cities, where they could help these little kids that are starving to death, but we turned a blind eye into that. But they're still allowed, Saudi Arabians are still allowed to come into our country, no problem. I'm sure we have migrants from there all the time. But we've taken 8 people from Yemen. All right, so you think 5,000 people are going to come in and overthrow the government, Tucker Carlson, in a coup? That makes no sense at all. 5,000 people is barely enough to swing a county election one way or the other between a Republican or a Democrat. Yeah, is that's going to change the national scale of things. That's one of their fears, is that like these people are, and Laura Ingram said it in the most disgusting way possible, and she has adopted kids from South America. So she's such a nasty, disgusting hypocrite, an awful person, and her kids are going to have to watch this when they get older, and they're going to see what their mom was saying about people that look exactly like them and came from a situation much like theirs, where they were probably born into poverty and didn't have any way else to make a life for themselves other than coming to America. But they go on to say, like, of course, they're criminals. They, like, just outright said it. Some of them did. I forget who exactly it was, but just all of them are criminals. Yeah, well, I mean, it's that easy. Look at them. You know, no matter if there's kids, women, you know, young males, because what ends up happening because of the war on drugs that we all know started in the U.S. In the 80s and 90s, especially when it got bad, all of the drug production moved south of the border to Mexico. Well, around 2006, the Mexican government had enough, so they used their military to start fighting these cartels and these drug syndicates, and that ended up pushing them in some ways, because we all know there's still terrible violence in Mexico that has stemmed from the drug war and goes on every day. It's a literal hot war, because I think over 200,000 people have died in it, probably more, because they're still finding mass graves that are, you know, being found all the time. That government action, though, pushed a lot of these operations south of the border into countries like Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. And these gangs ruthlessly hire people, much like a military terrorist group does, like ISIS, where they say they go into a village and all the men that don't join them, you get killed. You don't have a choice. It's either join us or die. And they flee their country, fearing for their life, having nowhere else to go. You know, Mexico, I don't know exactly how many people they take in every year because I don't study Mexican politics, but we take in, you know, a very small amount of people compared to the rest of the world. I mentioned earlier the immigration, you know, some countries took in over 1 million refugees. We've taken in a couple thousand, like less than 5,000, maybe less than 10,000, since the start of the Syrian civil war. And like I said, I think we've taken in 8 this year from Yemen. Oof. And, you know, they also bring up myths about the migrants bringing criminals in with the families. I'm sure that has happened, and I'm sure it will happen in the future. But to take that assumption and apply it to every single person is a logical fallacy, and you're just being a bigot when you think that way. And my favorite one is, like Laura Ingram said, Dems are just trying to use this to replace, like, you know, you. And when she says you, we know who she's talking to. Like, we know who the Fox News audience is. White males 68 and up. That's their target demographic. People who are actually scared of these caravans. Like, I bet this is what the average Fox viewer thinks of when they hear a migrant caravan. You know it's true. You know it's partially true. Like, you're like, yeah, kind of. I bet they do think that's what it looks like when they imagine it. they're probably speaking Spanish or like Portuguese or some like mix in between, of course. But it just goes to show how brazen Fox News is in their racism. I mean, let's be real. I'm not one to be a social justice type person where I'm gonna go and make videos about how using, or like, let's say dressing up as Indian or Native American on Halloween is a racist thing. Like, I really could care less about most PC outrage that comes from the left, and that's one of my big problems with the left. But when it comes to immigration, nobody's for open borders. That's another lie they like to say. Like, maybe one or two politicians have mentioned it in the past. I'm not exactly even sure if that's true. But an open borders society is actually a libertarian idea. Like, a true free market libertarian is for open borders, an open movement of goods and services not impeded by government or regulations or tariffs or taxes. They don't believe in any of that. They believe in free market, totally laissez-faire, fictional bullshit, but it's a very conservative Republican type of person that really is scared and really fears this. And when they see all of these images and hear all of this rhetoric from Fox News that just demonizes so many people who are fleeing for legitimate reasons, and some who I'm sure are not. Like, for instance, I saw an interview where some guy said he was only making $5 a day where he was from, and he wanted to move to America to make more money. Well, under the laws that we have, and I think it's reasonable, I think a lot of people will disagree, but I mean, that's a position I might be moved on, is that if you're coming as an economic refugee, you're not able to claim asylum here. Like, you have to be running from a legitimate, you have to be like legitimately fearful for your life and have a good reason as to why that is. You can't just waltz in here with a bag of cocaine and be like, yo, Holmes, I'm here to flee from violence and shit. Yeah. Like, okay, well, just what's in the bag? Like cocaine and fentanyl and heroin. You know, that's why I turned myself into the government instead of sneaking across, like, in the border somewhere else. Okay, that was probably fucked up, but you get my point. So just keep this in mind. This is what Fox News uses on their audience, and that's one of the most powerful tools of propaganda there is, which is fear.